Welcome to this very interesting session we have here for you. My name is Adrian Ephraim. I'm the editor of TechCabal. I'm based here in Cape Town in South Africa. Welcome to this Inside Identity 7.0 session. Today we'll be discussing beyond compliance, building a stronger defense against fintech fraud. And I have a very distinguished and experienced panel here to join me this morning. Firstly, let me just say to the Inside Identity was formerly Digital Identity Matters is a webinar series powered by QoreID, a VerifyMe company in partnership with TechCabal. QoreID is a digital identity platform that makes it easier for businesses to connect to trusted identities and critical consumer analytics. The platform provides API infrastructure access and customer insights to commercial and digital banks, fintechs, lenders, insurance, telcos, and utilities for onboarding, sales, and compliance. This event is organized by TechCabal Insights, the events research and data analytics arm of TechCabal. They're an Africa-focused digital economy consultancy that leverages big data to help startups, investors, operators, big tech companies, government, and other ecosystem players on and off the continent to answer specific questions and implement key interventions. Now, just to give you a little heads up on how the event will go, we will have a discussion with our distinguished panel here, and then I will throw the event open for questions from our audience. And wherever you're sitting at home or in the office, please get your questions in Q&A function, and we will get our guests to answer them. Our chat room moderator, Victoria, is standing by to answer your questions or to help you with your questions get in, so please do reach out. I'd like to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers today. We start off with Daniel Ade-Ojo. He's a fraud and intelligence specialist and KYC compliance and onboarding risk officer with a versatile experience managing various forms of fraud, KYC, and onboarding risks in the fintech industry. Welcome, Daniel. Next, we've got Anthony Onyangbo, who's the global head of credit at Lipa, previously working in other influential leadership roles for key organizations such as Wasoko International and specializing in credit risk management. Welcome to you, Anthony. We've got Esigie Aguele. I hope I got your name right, Esigie. Esigie is the co-founder and CEO of VerifyMe Nigeria, responsible for meeting the company's vision and mission and strategic plan for growth. He's an enterprise architect, engineer, and operations expert with experience in building fintech products and leading public sector business transformation programs. He's also seasoned in systems. I guess Stanley Matthews, I'm not sure if he's joined us. Stanley Jacobs, rather, we were waiting for him. I don't think he's here with us, but I'll introduce him as soon as he joins. And so too, I will introduce Superintendent Henry Mensah, who's yet to join us as part of the panel. I want to start off with some questions for our speakers. Firstly, welcome on board and thank you for making the time to be a part of this session. It's really good to have you here. My first question would go to Anthony, if it's okay. Earlier in the year, we've at TechCabal as well, we've reported on a lot of fraud perpetrated amongst fintech companies. Some have denied those allegations, but there have been numerous reports that other fintechs are suffering similar fates. Would you say that fintechs like Neotel, payment companies, and digital lenders are especially susceptible to online fraud? And how can they kind of mitigate these risks, Anthony?
Hello, Adrian. I'm unsure if Anthony is on the call, but could you please take the question again?
Hello, Adrian. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Anthony. Yes, Anthony. Did you get the question?
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking on mute. So there's two aspects to it. The first aspect is that the fintechs have revolutionized kind of how business is done. within the financial sector. The traditional financial sector involved somebody walking into a bank, the bank taking the photo, this guy filling a lot of documentation, and the bank originally thought that this kind of tedious process, was like the perfect KYC in terms of knowing your client. Then the person had to go through 1 or 3 months before he or she could like quantify or qualify for credit. And I think if you look at the financial services, one of the things that the financial services has done is that they have automated processes, use of AI to be in a position to do the same thing. So right now, rather than just walk into a bank, somebody can open an account virtually. Somebody can attach a copy of the ID virtually. There's technology that can do facial recognition to ascertain that this is Anthony, who is actually doing the same thing. There is auto scoring in terms of credit analytics, which essentially the same thing, but just using the AI to do the credit scores. Some of us went to school, did finance. We were taught a lot of financial ratios in terms of scoring people. So if you see that, like within the last 10 years, AI has actually changed this, not only using financial ratios, but using other metrics in terms of behavioral analytics to kind of score these clients or this clientele. So over the years, the fintech or the credit industry has changed. So what a bank could do by 10 branches and having a very big capital cost, a fintech can do by the use of a mobile phone and somebody sitting in UK or China and using AI. So it has changed the thought process of how financial services can be offered. But at the same time, there's an emergence of now what is called online risk, whereby a lot of fraud can happen. Essentially, when your systems are not right. The other day, I was looking at a university in Kenya called Kabrak University, where somebody claiming to be a hacker from a Malaysian high school hacked into their Facebook account and gave them an invoice and was telling them that, I think you guys, you can afford this money. So it just shows you in terms of the exposures that are currently happening. So yes, there's a lot of securities issues whereby people, especially technical expertise, can get into the system, create fake IDs or do withdrawal. From a client perspective, there's been levels of fraud whereby you're dealing with ghost clients because you did not physically ascertain these customers. So where AI and technology comes is now to draw the difference in terms of, yes, the change is inevitable. Everybody's embracing technology. The old is gone and the new is at our door. So at what level are we going to embrace this, and what technology is there to help financial managers like me continue to mitigate the risk without necessarily occurring like heavy expenditure? So that's the open conversation that is currently within the fintech space.
Yeah, lots of talk about the tech helping us out. As someone who is face as how do you constantly combat this? And it seems to be certainly anecdotally and certainly in the news seems to be on the rise. 2018 we had eTransact, apparently £1 billion in fraud. How do you combat threats and enhance your customer experience on your apps?
Thank you very much, Adrian, and good morning, everyone. Essentially, I'd like to emphasize that since the fintech came into play, we've seen tremendous approach to how they leverage mobile app, to offer their services to their users, to customers, essentially. So because of that, most of the activities that passes through the fintech channel is via the mobile app, right? And we can see over 80% adoption of a mobile device, smartphone, essentially. So one of the ways, there are several ways to manage threats. There are several ways to combat them, right? In order to you know achieve a safe space within your platform and across the banking space. So one of them is to build a robust security program. And what that means is, all the technology that exists within your system, you need to be able to fortify them and put in place appropriate controls to check, risky activities across the platform. And I will basically just, divide them into two. So one is the standardized security program, while the other one is the advanced technology program. So the standardized security program is your security approach to your customers' environment, right? So this is speaking to how, what are the security functions that exist when a customer is being onboarded? What are the security functions that exist when a customer wants to initiate transactions, make an order using your, depending on what service the fintech is offering. So, all of this just speaks to the security protocols that's in place for your user environment, right? While the advanced technology program essentially speaks to what you as a fintech, what you are doing to secure the back end operations of the app, right? So these are your softwares. What are the anti-malware functions that are in place? Anti-hooking, a lot of things that protect your network, right, from being, attacked externally, right? And how you are able to flag all of these things in case they are triggers. So all of these things just makes a robust security program, right? And another thing is also to continually um, update your technology, right? It's very important that you are not using an outdated technology or an outdated security tool to secure your space, right? You need to put in checks in place that continually addresses that continuously promotes automatic updates, while you ensure that there's a right set of team to be able to monitor all of these things, just in case the system is unable to flag some things in real time. Then other aspect is also you conducting a fraud risk assessment of the mobile app, right? So what this allows you to do is to evaluate the existing vulnerabilities, on the app, right? While you're able to profile, better solutions, better approach to managing all of the identified gaps, right? And I would also like to mention audit activities, right? You need to have a functioning audit management system. Essentially, those that are behind the system itself and processes that are in place really needs to be subjected to audit, adequate audit, right? Because you need to be able to perform audit activities across the app, across the people that are building the system, right? Just to you need to look for the lines of approval to see that for the most significant features to security, it does not include a person operating the verifying and approving level, right? There has to be lines of approval just to be able to manage the risk, right? And putting all of this into perspective, customer experience is, as you say, it's very important. So you need to be able to evaluate the kind of service, the kind of product that exists on your app, and put in the reasonable security measurement, right? The measurement you're going to put in a service that involves transfer to out of your fintech ecosystem to other position has to be, a bit more stringent compared to other services that is being restricted within your own fintech ecosystem. So, and today, we've seen a lot of move towards previously, we used to see approaches to 2FA, but now, the system has become so wild, vulnerabilities and everything, and now we are seeing approaches towards MFA approach, multi-factor authenticator, right? And as Anthony mentioned earlier, this is where you leverage systems of liveness verification, biometric check, right? Essentially, so you just basically look at biometric authentication and behavioral biometrics. So all of these things just puts you in a safer position to operate a safe space and also attaining optimal customer experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that feedback. I'd like to introduce another member of our panel who's just arrived, Dr. Stanley Jacobs. Pleasure to have you on our panel. Dr. Stanley Jacobs is the payments executive and a business leader specializing in digital transformation, emerging payments, and financial inclusion. He's also a director at MasterCard, VP of Governing Council for FinTech Association of Nigeria, chairman of the Committee of E-Business Industry Heads Up Nigeria. Dr. Jacobs, welcome.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks. Apologies for joining late. I had a bit of challenge. I'm currently in transit, but I'm glad I'm able to make this now.
Not a problem at all. We've also got Mohammed Maibe, who's the Director of Corporate Growth and Strategy for VerifyMe, and we'll be hearing a bit more from him a bit later. My next question is for Esigie. As Daniel has explained, there's a lot of building going on, a lot of innovators are building solutions all the time that are kind of different to traditional banking. This might create a bit of complexity in terms of KYC. And so how do you build KYC or digital identity solutions to address some of these dynamics, some of these innovations that are happening in the space?
And that's a great question. And if I may, I would say reframe the perception a bit. It's more than adding complexity. I would say it's adding a lot of excitement. One of the things is that the innovation that's happening in the ecosystem, in the fintech ecosystem, is actually there today to solve problems in fraud. So I'm sure we've seen a lot about what's happening in the news. So for us, building, I would say, building a KYC digital identity solution system that addresses these issues means you're always building products that are up to date, basically technology products that are up to date with emerging, fraud. So for example, and this is actually to answer one of the questions that I think one of the panelists spoke about in terms of, how do you get a robust KYC system, but still keep your costs down as a company? And to answer that question really is one of the reasons why you have KYC operators like us. I would say the complexity lies more for us in socializing all the multiple products that are out there to help our customers solve problems. So for example, we have a lot of customers that come to us today because they want to solve the problem of identity, getting access to identity. And really, this is, one of the reasons why we're even having this webinar, right? Because it's beyond identity. It's really going beyond APIs, even sometimes SDKs, but into the analytics space as well. And they're coming to us for APIs, and they tell us, well, we have our own biometrics, but not looking at the fact that when they use an operator, we can give them biometric solutions that dedupe, the face of the individual so that face can never be used again across sometimes an ecosystem of 250 fintechs, which they can never produce. We have information on location intelligence in that payload where they're just getting identity. And so these are really emerging products that we're really excited about. What I would advise is I think there should be an embracing of the digital transformation that's happening in the KYC space, as opposed to looking at it as complexity. And I think when we reframe that, it's really going to be a very exciting time for fintech. And I think that when we actually start to do that, a lot of fintechs would have the time to build their own products and rechannel their engineering, because one of the things we feel also, and hopefully we can even have more of a conversation about here, is how fintechs are spending so much engineering time trying to augment building some KYC engineering products, where it's really mostly not necessary, I would say, when they're companies that would provide that service for you for a fraction of the cost. So that's the question, I would say, in short form. The last thing I will add to it is every time technology is emerging, we always kind of sometimes see it as complex, but really as we come together and collaborate and have conversation about this technology, we'll realize that it's not so there's nothing to be afraid about. It's actually there to solve problems for us.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Esigie. Question for Daniel and Anthony for the moment. What measures would you suggest, and I'll start with Anthony, what measures would you suggest that an early stage startup fintech could take to implement a fraud mitigation system and manage some of the financial crime risks that I guess they all face?
Thanks, Adrian. I think I've been there. I've been in that space, and the original way of how people will normally try is that they'll try it themselves, then they'll quickly realize that they're incurring a lot of losses, and they're incurring a lot of capital expenditure in terms of just running this. So the best I'll advise right now is just to find a technology. There's quite a lot of technology currently available that can help you do the KYC in terms of automation, because you're looking at two scenarios. You're looking at your ability to make a decision while managing the risk. Then you're also looking at ability of your clients to access your product or your service anywhere. So if you look at this within the startup framework, then one of the best advices I'll give is that don't spend time trying to reinvent the wheel. Some people have taken a lot of time doing this. Some people have the right resources doing this, and they normally charge it at a fee. You would have charged it at a fee to the customer, so there is no replica effect. Just outsource this service to the required people, and they'll give you what you need.
Fantastic. Daniel, anything to add?
That's fantastic advice.
Indeed.
Yes. That's really insightful. Coming from managing the risk earlier on. So this is where I'm going to speak more on KYC, right? So I think in order to help startups, right, they really need to look more into managing the risk earlier on, right, which is at the point of onboarding, which is where your KYC program really needs to be solid, right? And you can basically achieve that by leveraging the expertise of digital identity organizations, right? That would help you inculcate the adequate amount of KYC program to even manage this risk, right, before they become a big thing for you as an organization, right? Because startups are susceptible to some of these types of risk, especially when it becomes a big problem in the system, right? So one of the best ways is in partnership with the digital KYC organizations, right? They have the right amount of expertise, right, to be able to manage some of the high risk or e-trade activities that you are exposed to, essentially. So yes, that's really insightful. So I just wanted to point more on that.
who's here with us. He's not on screen right at the moment, but it's Superintendent Mensah. Welcome, Superintendent. It's good to have you here. So is a highly accomplished law enforcement professional, 28 years of experience in domestic and international policing experience. So I'm going to sit up straight and pay attention, including 3 United Nations missions. He holds a first-class honors degree in human resource management from the University of Ghana, Legon, and a master's degree in international affairs from Legon Center for International Affairs and Diplomacy. It's a real honor to have you here, Superintendent. Welcome.
Thank you. It's unfortunate I just got the invitation. That is how come I've delayed in showing up.
No problem.
What am I expected to do if I should ask?
Well, I'll bring you into the conversation in a bit. I've got a couple of questions for you just around fintech fraud and how you work with some of the companies that are not involved, but some of the companies that are affected by fintech fraud. But before we get that, I just want to target a question for Esigie and Stanley. Beyond leveraging digital identity, are there any other critical layers of support that digital identity can bring to the table with regards to prevention and mitigation of fraud?
Yes, and I think this is really the next area. And one of the things, when we look at the ecosystem, I think people look at it from a digital identity perspective. But when you talk about QoreID, for example, and then look at the positioning in terms of being able to give the customer that first, establishing that first trust transaction with the digital ID, at that point of onboarding, we are really the only layer that has the ability to give the customer more insight in terms of alerting the customer to certain things. And as we socialize, this is why we always talk to our customers and say, listen, it doesn't make sense to build so many of these products yourselves, because we are the only ones that can really share certain amounts of data for you. And I can give you 2 specific use cases when you talk about fraud from our perspective. So one area of fraud in Nigeria and across Africa is the identity type of fraud, where maybe somebody has multiple unique IDs. So they can have maybe multiple names or BVNs of the same type, but it's the same person. And they use that to open accounts. So, one of the things that, because we're technology companies, is that we're able to prevent that for all of our customers. And we don't just prevent that for our customers in their siloed ecosystem, but we prevent it across our entire ecosystem, so that that person can never use 2 government IDs again, right? They can only use one. And that is really solving, a huge area where, because we have some gaps in documentation where people are able to, get more get additional IDs for themselves. You now have the second area of behavioral, right? I would say risk assessment. So for example, and these are services that we're providing to our customers, right? So we have about 150 fintechs using us, probably about 16 commercial banks, maybe 40 microfinance banks. One of the big fraud areas is also phishing, which is linked to identity. So what does phishing mean? Maybe the person is trying to phish and open multiple accounts, right? At the same time. So I want to go do at bank X, bank A, bank B. Well, because we are onboarding those banks, what can we do for our customers? We can say, hey, this person has tried to open 20 accounts, right, across our banking ecosystem, right? And these are the powerful things that our customers cannot solve for themselves, that only us, because we are the middleware operators, right, are able to really solve for our customers. So really wanted to call that out. And it's only the beginning, because at that point, you're also getting to the analytics, the better risk assessments that we provide for our customers, additional location intelligence information. So it's really more of an argument of collaboration And as we talk about it more, one of the things I always say to, a lot of my customers as well and founders is, if you look at developed nations, there is a reason why the fintechs in those nations are not building the products themselves. What do they know, right, that you're not doing? Number one, they probably know how much it diverts from their engineering internally when they should be building products for themselves. Number two is that they know that they're locking themselves out of an enterprise environment, enterprise reporting environment as well, which they can get for themselves. So those, I think, are the two powerful things that we bring to the table for sure.
Fantastic, thank you, Esigie. Stanley, anything to add to that?
Okay. Thank you, Adrian. I just want to add a few points to what Esigie has said. But I think I should lay background first because I'm just joining the call. It's very important that we re-emphasize that the new business landscape presents challenges, very new challenges. And the question is always, how do you achieve, as a fintech, how do you achieve digital growth while meeting customer expectations? As fintechs grow, the risks of fraud gets higher. And how vulnerable can the company be when expansion comes in? We also need to acknowledge that this is ever increasing in sophistication. Fraud and cyber attacks are taking advantages of so many companies' vulnerabilities and causing a lot of damages. On the average, IBM puts it at 33 billion personal data stolen by cyber criminals every year. And it is estimated that this theft causes about $6 trillion in damages annually. Of course, we don't know where this is going to take us to. So we know that there have been a lot of tools. Tools are evolving. Esigie is doing quite a lot with VerifyMe. But I'll speak from an ecosystem perspective and what the expectations are for the industry at this time. When you use digital identity for KYC, it is like gatekeeping and assuming that everyone who goes through the gate will be compliant, but it's not really so in reality, right? So I think that beyond KYC and digital identity, there are a lot of other things we should look at, and I'll just go through these 6 points. One of them is account opening protection, which is the KYC we have on. But beyond trying to know, KYC says know your customer. Beyond trying to know your customer, we should be able to detect high-risk new applications. So when people apply, how do you know that they could come in with malicious intent from day one? That is where we need to get to. Even if you have never seen the user before, how can you detect high-risk new applications? Secondly, account takeover protection. How do you detect human and non-human fraud threats that could lead to account takeover, right? So because people open accounts and they are taking over, and while some people never opened and they have one, even up to loans and so many other things. Thirdly, blacklist verification. This is where we are now, as of today. Beyond identifying people and saying KYC, how do we use digital identity to drive sanctions? How do we use it to drive PEP identification and management? How do we use it to manage adverse media directories, right? Managing blacklist effectively is something that we have not done well. And we see the same fraudsters, similar patterns hitting different institutions within the same ecosystem. We need to step up in that regard. Number 4, customer profile assessments. How do you, beyond doing the KYC at the point of onboarding, how do you detect suspicious behavior and you do continuous updates or periodic updates to the database? We need to do regular behavioral monitoring. The guy can come in as clean 2 years ago. What if he becomes rogue on the 3rd year? So there needs to be regular behavioral monitoring. Number 4, transaction screening. How do you detect high risk and suspicious transactions? Of course, is an element of behavioral monitoring, but we need to pay particular attention to transactions. And lastly, social engineering scam detection, right? How do you uncover subtle behavioral anomalies that suggest that a victim is operating under the influence of a criminal, right? If you see a customer who does 100,000 transaction in 1 month, suddenly does it in 100,000 5 times in 5 hours, you should know that something is wrong, right? How do we step forward without waiting for the customer to report these incidences? I think we need to take it into a more predictive, more proactive interaction, not just for the customer, but for every other stakeholder in the ecosystem. I'll just pause there for now, but in trying to do that, I want to wrap that point up by saying behavior tells it all when it comes to digital identity and fraud. So today we have advanced fraud tools that continue to rely on devices and location, right? We are now trying to take it up, but we have to focus on behavioral biometrics to provide a rich layer of defense that can increase trust and provide better customer experience across digital channels. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. Some brilliant points that you've raised there. I think my next question to Superintendent Mensah, I mean, you've heard from Stanley the kind of the impact fraud is having, the kind of complexity that needs to be built in. Are these fintech companies, financial services companies, working with police officials to combat security threats, Superintendent Mensah? What is your experience and dealings with stakeholders in this space?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My experience with my colleagues, you realize that security challenges with fintech companies keep evolving each passing day. We are talking of security issues and data privacy, big data and AI integration, blockchain integration, compliance with government regulations, lack of mobile and tech expertise, and growth issues and effective marketing to acquire customers, then user retention and user experience issues. And like the previous speaker said, there are a lot of measures that we need to put in place to ensure that we curtail some of these challenges associated with fintech. So we've been collaborating with them and working closely with them to ensure that they use appropriate technologies like liveness detection technologies to identify verification show, which provides excellent results. We are talking of customer behavior. It is important to know the habits of your clients and monitor their behavioral patterns. These patterns could include a change of address, duplicate card requests, password resets, typical spend velocity, among others. And we are also looking at issues of biometric security. And it is much harder for a criminal to fool a system that uses a person's unique physical characteristics. While passwords can be lost and stolen, biometrics serve as an additional barrier for fraudsters to overcome or to bypass. And although biometrics could also be fake, forging biometrics takes much more time and many more currency, let me say in dollar rate. And basic web safety. We are looking at giving orientation to clients to avoid leaving their cards exposed, taking on unfamiliar links, opening digital wallets, connecting to public Wi-Fi systems, trusting well-known companies that send job offers in return for registration and personal data submittal. All these things are measures that we are collaborating with these companies. And we also emphasize on choosing the right partner, knowing the KYC that we are talking about requirements and biometric verification, which are traditional tools in the market. But there are plenty of scammers who produce high quality fake documents. And to prevent this, search for duplicate documents. For example, cross-check if a registered customer shares the same photo with a different user. If so, the passport was manually forged or whatever. Therefore, it is important to partner with companies that have a wide base of documents and identities. At this stage, let me pause here. I'm looking at it from the law enforcement perspective and how we've been collaborating with companies to overcome some of the challenges that I've mentioned.
Fantastic. Thank you, Superintendent. Just to pause to remind you guys that that this event is brought to you by QoreID as a VerifyMe company. You can also send in your questions. We will be answering, your panel will be answering the questions a little bit after this. So looking forward to that. Please do make use of that. I'm sure you have tons of questions. Another question for Stanley. We realize that, as a fintech company, when you're in the news, around stories around fraud, it does raise an eye. It does, people do ask questions about, the company's kind of protocols and that. And what consequences have you experienced or observed about this from a regulatory perspective, when companies do kind of get themselves embroiled or are victims of fraud in the fintech space?
In fact, sorry. I thought it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Adrian. I'll try to take this from two perspectives, right? And first of all, I'll talk about a regulatory alert after a fraud. First, we must realize that the regulatory body or the regulators, they hold a primary responsibility to safeguard the licensed organization and the users of their products and solutions. Then we also need to acknowledge that a fraud in payments is like a catastrophe, right? It's like asking why a government official or why the superintendent here will sleep on the field carrying out a rescue operation after an earthquake or an explosion. It is a normal thing, right? So when regulators come out when there is a fraud, it is a similar scenario, just different ecosystems, right? So when a fraud occurs, the regulator is at that time looking out for three key things. One of them is compliance. Have you complied to the relevant standards and regulatory requirements? The second is transparency. Have you been transparent enough in your communications around that fraud, both before, during, and in the remediation efforts? And the third is integrity. Have you been truthful in the information that you've been putting out there? If we miss out on any of these three, we can never get it right. Okay, so the regulator always tries to rule out these factors as underlying causes first, before going into other aspects of the investigation. And of course, Adrian, that at this point, it will be a heightened interaction. So that's why it looks like there's a lot of pressure. But I believe personally that overall, the objective of having all stakeholders alert after a fraud, including the regulator, is to ensure that we emerge stronger and we do not have the same set of fraudsters hitting on other institutions using similar patterns. I would say in wrapping up this point that fintechs or fintech companies that have been suspected of fraud will need to build trust by communicating effectively at all levels to their board, their investors, their regulators, and their customers, including any other stakeholders that I might have missed out. And they need to let these stakeholders know about the incidents. Okay, they need to let the stakeholders know what they have done to forestall a reoccurrence, and they need to be accountable. Okay, right now, what we see more of is when there is a fraud, there are more of denials than communication. Okay, we need to make the communications more effective. Secondly, fintechs need to operationally close loopholes, fix the gaps when these things happen, and also try as much as possible to conduct internal and external vulnerability assessments and other form of testing to obtain a clean bill of health. when we do these two things, I think the tension will drop drastically. If you're an investor or a shareholder and you get to hear from the blogs or the news that your company has been hit and the stakeholders are not talking to you, come on, we should expect anything, right? So I think we should pay very key attention to these two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley. Daniel, similar question to you. How do fintech companies build trust? Once they have been, or if they have been suspected of fraud, had been victim of fraud cases, how do they build trust with their stakeholders and their merchants?
Yeah, I think Stanley just nailed the point there, right? It's essentially you being transparent to your stakeholders, right, internally and externally. You need to be able to, address what has happened, right, and what you are doing to prevent a recurrence, right? And as much as possible, you need to be able to establish or make your customers understand that if you are compliant with certain regulatory standards or high standards, you need to be able to push that out. If you are PCI DSS compliance and all of those things. So it's basically addressing it and being transparent, right? And as Stanley mentioned, honesty seems to be the best policy in this case, right? And constant communication, addressing it with your customers, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fantastic. I've got a question for a few of our panelists. Maybe I can start with Anthony, if that's okay. How can collaboration within the financial services industry and the trust infrastructure providers help strengthen fraud prevention and digital identity solutions? Can I start with Anthony? Or if Esigie wants to take it?
Sure, if Anthony is not on. So how can fintechs and KYC operators strengthen basically the KYC service we provide? And I think Dr. Stanley, touched on this as well. The first thing is collaboration, which, by the way, I think is one of the deficits in the African founder ecosystem that we kind of need to rebuild. But if you look at the archetype in developed countries, nobody has been able to do this without collaboration. But let's even make it more technical. The very definition of enterprise reporting, or the very definition of reporting, so that you can get access to data, at the point of onboarding, means that data has to be reported in a federated way. What does that mean? That means that it has to be freely reported, right, by the people who are interacting with the customers, and it has to be reported into an environment where people have access to for on-demand reporting. And I think this is the area where we may have come together in most of the countries in Africa on the credit side, but we haven't necessarily come together on the fraud side. And this is where the onboarding companies, because we have the technology, because we build technology at a fast pace, because we are the ones who onboard individuals for our customers, we are literally in the best, and I would argue the only position to sustainably provide that service for industry. And so that's really one of the ways that we can come together to collaborate and really solve this problem, but we can for sure.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Esigie. I've got a quick question for the superintendent here. When is the right time to inform about fraud threats to police officials, and how do they solve these issues?
I wouldn't say there's any time lag for reporting, but experience shows that it is very, very important to report it immediately you detect them for any further theft to be perpetrated. So for me, I would say as soon as you sense danger about what is happening, you need to inform law enforcement agencies immediately. for them to roll out measures to prevent it further. Now, in terms of solving, they are quite, it's more or less transnational crime. It goes beyond the borders of one country. So there are softwares that are coming up that helps us to trace transactions online. And in doing so, we collaborate with international agencies. Let me say Interpol plays a very crucial role when it comes to some of these fraud activities, and also other top international bodies. So time lag, I would say immediately it has to be reported, and we collaborate with other international bodies or agencies beyond the borders of our countries. Nigeria, for instance, we have a lot of collaboration with them, and we collaborate a lot. And there have been success stories where we've located where criminals are, that we face them out and prosecutions have gone on. So it's a kind of a network of collaboration, not only for law enforcement. You are talking of prosecution. What are the regulations guarding such acts? You need to collaborate with the requisite agencies in order to ensure that you prosecute and also institute deterrence measures going forward. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Superintendent. I'm going to, time is not with us at the moment, so I'm going to jump into some Q&As from our audience, if you don't mind. I've got a question here from Precious Kunukunu, and it could be to anyone who wants to take this, either Daniel perhaps or Esigie. How can you mitigate account takeover? It's quite a broad question. Anyone want to have a stab at that? How can you mitigate account takeover?
Yes. We can, because I would love to take that, because this is one of our specialties, and there are multiple ways to mitigate account takeovers. The first thing is biometrics. One of the ways that we help our customers solve this problem is by providing powerful biometrics for reauthentication, so that, for example, you can't change your password without biometrics verification. Now, even, of course, if you look at 2023, we have the problem of synthetic media, right, where AI can basically even spoof biometrics. So we also have the ability, and this is really based on your internal risk-based assessment for our customer, multi-factor authentication. So people have even talked about it here. A combination of biometrics and multi-factor authentication really helps to solve this problem. But there's one key thing when we talk about biometrics, because I really want to go back to building your own biometrics, right? I keep telling my customers, it is a big problem. And I tell all the CEOs I talk to and founders, it's really perhaps engineering time could be channeled more efficiently. But when you look at the account takeover issue specifically here and biometrics, I'll give you another use case, right? If somebody took over your local phone and you had an innovative fintech that had said, well, we're going to build our own biometrics, and started leveraging on the device biometrics, right? It means that when they take over the phone, right, and they change the biometrics, that biometrics is going to open the fintech accounts, right? And a lot of people don't think about these things, right? But when you use our biometrics, because you're locked into using a face that is linked to a government ID, right? They're not going to be able to replace that or spoof that. And so there's so many ways under that we really solve the problem of account takeover for our customers, that, when we have conversations with them, there's the light bulb and they realize that they should be using us. But, hopefully I answered some of that question.
Thank you so much, Esigie. Appreciate that. Question from James Williams. I'd like to know with the advent of fintech, what is the possibility that an individual who has the knowledge to have a startup without any government authentication? What threat does this pose to the general public? Anyone want to have a stab at that? Daniel or Anthony?
I don't even think it's compliant. I don't think you can be licensed.
Yeah.
I don't think that's compliant.
It'd be very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I can take a dive in that.
Yeah.
So if you look at many markets, a lot of African governments are actually encouraging startups. So it shouldn't be much of an issue to start the business. But now how you model your business really matters. I've seen scenarios whereby there's a lot of PNPL, which is buy now, pay later, which does not necessarily mean that you're giving the actual liquid cash, but you're actually giving commodities in terms of like hire purchase. If you model this well, you do not need to go into regulation. There are terminologies you cannot use in certain markets, like credit, banking, stuff like that. So it depends with a lot of regulation from country to country. Like in my country, Kenya, the government is trying to regulate the fintech space. We are still watching each other because none of us we don't want them to regulate us. At the same time, there was a public outcry in terms of data privacy. You've heard of scenarios whereby mobile loans have created WhatsApp with all your contacts just to get you to start making payments. And these things are real. So there's a lot of regulation. The regulatory part of it, it's inevitable. It's going to crop slow by slow amongst the African countries. So the best advice is you should operate within threshold. And that's why I normally advise the people who have already done this, get in touch with the professionals and they'll be in a position to direct you.
Thank you very much for that. I think it really makes sense to me. I'd like to call on Mohammed Maibi at this point, Director of Corporate Growth and Strategy for VerifyMe, who has some closing remarks. I can't believe how quickly the time has gone past. I mean, we could talk about this for another hour, I'm sure, but it's Friday. Mohammed, welcome again. Good to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Very much, Adrian. Yes, the time has gone by very quickly. I think there's a lot more that we can sort of delve into as it relates to this topic. I would first of all like to thank our audience members for joining us and for your engagements and your questions throughout the sessions. I hope you found them very valuable. Next, I would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us and for sharing your insights and your general expertise on the subject matter. I think we've all sort of learned a lot more and gained insights into sort of the overall issues of fraud within the fintech space and how you can sort of harness the power of digital identity and biometric authentications to help safeguard our respective platforms and businesses from fraud. Lastly, I would like to thank TechCabal Insights for your continued partnership on Inside Identity. We truly value the collaboration that we've sort of took on. Lastly, I would say that at QoreID, we will continue to build, develop, and innovate sort of cutting-edge solutions that can help combat fraud and then also to ensure the security of our customers. For our audience members that have been joining us and have been listening to this wonderful panel, we would love to sort of continue the conversation and share a bit more about QoreID and how you can also sort of pick on the power of QoreID to improve on your onboarding and sort of your compliance processes and how you can sort of implement some of these solutions that we discussed on this call. We're happy to engage with you one-on-one. Please reach out to us where we can sort of share a bit more on our products, which sort of go beyond identity to include some of the products and solutions that have been mentioned on this wonderful panel, including customer profiling, fraud prevention, digital addressing, just anything to, first of all, assess biometrics and then also behavioral traits of individuals. You can reach out to us either through our website, which is www.QoreID.com, or you can send us an email via QoreID, contact us at QoreID.com. So I'll just repeat that. website is www.QoreID.com, or email us at contact@QoreID.com. We look forward to hearing from everyone, and then also welcome you guys back to the next edition of Inside Identity. So thank you very much. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I've actually just been informed that we do have a bit more time. So I've got a few more questions and maybe some questions for the audience. So thank you for that in any case, Mohammed. I appreciate your sentiments there. But let's keep the conversation going for a little bit more. See more questions coming in from our audience. One of them I have here is, what are examples of apps created to safeguard online banking? Again, a pretty broad question, but if anyone wants to take a stab at that, I'm more than welcome to. The question is, what are examples of apps created to safeguard online banking?
So, and I can take a stab at that. Maybe I can even help, correct. So I wouldn't say it's an app that's created to safeguard online banking, as opposed to technology that's integrated into an online banking app to help safeguard, the online banking app. And it's a combination of multiple things, right? So there's the online banking side of things, and there's also the internal risk management side of things. So even when we talk about customer behavior, right? There's customer behavior that an onboarding company would have access to, such as somebody trying to open 100 accounts across 50 companies in 3 days. But there's also customer behavior that the internal risk management process will have access to, such as that person, as Dr. Stanley said, trying to do multiple transactions in a very short period of time. And I think all of these need to be integrated together. When people look at their, I would say, their end-to-end, user interaction life cycle, and how from onboarding to using, it's really about implementing the right technology at that point. And you can always do risk assessments for these, right? So if you use VerifyMe, the answer to that question specifically would be, that we have SDKs that actually are, low code, that work with mobile apps, and, Android, iOS, and obviously React, all of them, that are able to help protect our customers. But also not just help protect our customers, but also help our customers with their customer acquisition. Right, so you don't want to just protect the customers and it's some hard hammer that's very difficult for their own customers. But so it's about an overall user experience that you're bringing to the table for our customers. So we provide so many conveniences, like the ability to drag and drop workflows. So depending on if you can be a bank and you can come with a company with VerifyMe and QoreID, our B2B product, have one workflow for account opening, have another workflow for a loan, have another workflow for a car loan. Depending on the service you're providing, you can have multiple workflows and safeguard your business based on the risk assessment for that workflow. And amongst our almost 20 technology products that we provide to our customers, there's pretty much a menu of products you can bring together that we call the complete workflow to keep our customers fully compliant. So I hope that answers the question. So it's more technology that that you can implement to keep your product safe.
Thank you for that, Esigie. Another question from our audience: is there a foolproof security measure out there for fintech products and services? Is there such a thing as foolproof? Are we all?
So essentially, I think a part of what Esigie mentioned earlier speaks to this one. So it's more of a combination of a lot of things, right? So you need to have the right system, you need to have the right technology, as well as having the right people to manage and make decisions, using all of these tools at the same time. So it's a lot of combination of so many things. So which is why, as much as possible, you need to invest rightly, in the right tools, partner with the best of the best, in terms of a lot of all of these evaluations, fraud management system, KYC identity management system. So you need to, it's a combination of all of these things. for a better result.
Thank you for that, Daniel. Just a reminder to our audience at home or in the office, we are going to be running a poll. So please do take part in that poll. I would encourage you to participate in that, which our team will throw up in a few minutes. There you go. Please do take part in that. Appreciate that. Another question from our audience, someone anonymous. How can we balance the need for a strong fraud prevention with the need to provide a frictionless and user-friendly customer experience? I'm sure you might have touched on it a bit earlier, some of our panelists, but
yeah.
To answer our audience.
Yeah, so, one of the ways I would say, first of all, is, I think, we always talk about open banking in Nigeria. CBN recently passed some regulation regarding open banking. So first of all, for it to be seamless, we have to have semantic interoperability across systems, right? And, as long as we can provide the information to our customers at the point of onboarding seamlessly and real time, from our perspective, seamless is also real time. So the ID happens real time, the fraud checks happen real time. It's really being able to give our customer that information real time in a standardized way, so that we can share fraud data across multiple systems. I think that would really be our target that we need to meet for it to work.
Yeah, fantastic. Got a question for Daniel. It's from Pelumi, sorry. Can someone undo a transaction immediately after sending it to the wrong account? Any help for this?
No, it's gone. But then there's a process that allows you to report it, through your bank, right? And so just a timely, notification through your bank would help. And there's a regulatory provision around that, right? So it allows you to report to your bank. The bank writes to the receiving bank, right? And a lien is being placed. There's processes to contact the beneficiary to give a consent to recall, right? And if that consent is given, a reversal is going to be initiated, right? And there are other ways where a consent is not given. There are other provisions to that. So once you've made that mistake, right, you should report it, at your bank. You might as well report it, log it with the beneficiary bank to just hit quick action.
Thank you for that, Daniel. I hope that helps you, Pelumi, answer your question. It appears that we can't get away from talking about AI in any conversation, whether at the dinner table, in the queue, at the supermarket. We're all talking about AI. And I guess the obvious question here is, and I think it might have been touched on, Stanley mentioned it a little bit earlier as well, and how can we deploy AI for fraud detection in fintechs? Quite a simple question, but yeah, anyone wants to add to that, Stanley or Esigie?
Yeah, so oh wow, it's simple, but it's loaded, right? So an AI for KYC, goes applies in multiple layers. So I would say that first of all, we already use AI in our biometrics, right? And in our OCR. But if the first way we really use AI when you talk about the human behavior analytics. A lot of times you are going to be using a lot of data science and AI technology to come up with your risk assessment, basically on what looks like it should be flagged as fraud. So that's really where it's even probably already been applied, but because Nigeria was still in the early stages of our 5 V's of data, volume, variety, veracity, value, all of that, it's not so robust yet. But when you think about the full stack, at the end of the day, why are we discussing what we're discussing? We're discussing this because of our economy, right? It's about pushing economic growth, which we believe, of course, fintech is one of the major pillars and drivers of. And then we're now saying that identity and KYC is a pillar and driver of FinTech. So when you look at this, AI, what does it mean for us is when you now look at the technology stack, as we go from identity to analytics, right? A lot of the analytics that we provide to our customers, on their customers in the future, is going to be based on AI as well. And this is really the final, or the third data as a service layer that we're all marching towards, I would say, in our emerging market ecosystem. So this is where AI is very powerful. It's powerful now in terms of helping solve human behavioral analytics, and it would also be more powerful in the future when we're looking at more complex analytics in terms of even credit worthiness or default scores and those types of things as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Esigie. I've got a question here from Mom Chia. He or she asked, what happens when consent is declined? I'm not sure if that's enough detail to answer the question, but speaking of consent, what in the scenario where it declined, what is the
Adrian,
situation?
I can just come in. So I think the question is in relation to the first question asked by Pelumi. How are you able to undo a transaction? So in the case where a consent is declined by the beneficiary, two things can happen. So one of the things that can happen is the two banks, right? That's the sending and the receiving bank, can mediate, right, and decide on what to do depending on the activities around the erroneous claim, right? And the second thing is you, as the sender, where the beneficiary is not giving consent, you may be required to provide a court order, right, which would be served against the receiving bank and the receiving account holder, right? So with the court order, you would be able to get your money back, right? Or based on the discretion of the banks, they would be able to decide what's appropriate.
Something small to add to what you just said. That is the gap sometimes when the law enforcement agency has come in, where we file what we call an ex parte motion. We swear an affidavit and serve it on the bank that is supposed to provide the needed information. And with that, the bank cannot decline when the court orders it to do so. I just wanted to add that.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Superintendent Mensah. It's appreciated. What are the rules governing data retention laws as it relates to security? Anyone wants to take a go at that particular question?
I would love to. So the rules regarding data retention laws are guided under NDPR, basically, which and so for Nigeria and of course for Ghana, there's the I think there's a Privacy Protection Act that's in effect, and for all the different countries in Africa, and so we generally have rules. Now, in terms of data retention, it is a little bit of a tricky area because it is, and so for example, I think Nigeria just implemented a tokenization strategy only for the NIN product, which basically removes the NIN and masks it, removes the NIN from private sector. And really, this is quite problematic, right, for private sector. It is not a sustainable program because really it's, one of the things we need to make sure that we don't do, that is that we don't overprotect data at the expense of growth and economic growth and our ability to secure society. And so I can give a perfect, an example use case, for example, right? Let's assume that a telco is using an operator for a SIM registration, right? And we have an individual who in 48 hours wants to get 50 SIMs, right? Across multiple operators, right? if we don't retain data and have access to the NIN, we will never be able to provide that risk alert to industry, right? That this person, right, because we retained the data and because we have the NIN, has, is potentially trying to commit some fraud. Take, for example, in real estate, right? Even in society, if we are reporting people who are committing crimes in neighborhoods in estates in Nigeria, for example, if we are not retaining data on reporting, we will not be able to report data to somebody else to potentially save that person from hiring them, for their child or for their nanny, right? So with retaining data, I am 100% for retaining data, but I am also 100% for retaining data with regulated organizations that also provide digital sovereignty for our country, right? So it's not about, a foreign company, coming to, unfortunately, retain Nigerians' very sensitive data, right? And I think what we should do, right, is look at the sustainable way to achieve our goals, as opposed to use sometimes a sledgehammer approach, right, which sometimes could kill other things in society to solve our problem. So I hope that solves the problem. I wanted to use the opportunity to even talk about the retaining data. It's people don't want data retained, but data retained with the right operator actually also solves problems, fraud problems, and crime problems in society.
Indeed, indeed. Question from Edward Pangile. How do fintechs strategically address the fraudulent chargebacks on virtual cards issued by some fintechs? A lot of talk about virtual cards these days.
So what I would just say to that is, you as an institution just completing the cycle checks that governs chargeback, right? Which starts from, the individual logging the chargeback, and also ensuring that you have gotten in touch with the merchants, which is the end of this cycle, right? So you don't want to do it halfway, and or without getting through to the merchant, you want to approve a chargeback request that has been logged. So you essentially, it's very important that you complete the cycle checks, starting from who has reported it, hand to the merchants, to be able to decide appropriately.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you, Daniel. Got a question from Ademola. He says, I realize that FinTech now engages in multiple classes of investment on the same platform. How are FinTech experts guarding against money laundering as recommended by the SEC? Money laundering question.
Okay, my take on that would just be by just establishing a right amount of compliance program that allows you to comply with relevant laws, around money laundering or any form of financial crime activities. So there's a lot of helpful hints to how you can essentially manage risk exposures or this activity. So establishing a very good compliance program, a very good compliance culture would enhance your approach in this aspect.
Great stuff. Thank you, Daniel. I'll just I could just take one more question, and then we'll do a final round of closing remarks. A question from Festus. How come payment companies such as Flutterwave and Paystack are able to debit fintechs for disputed payments, even without obtaining any consent or court order? Is this the right thing to do?
So I think one of the things I mentioned earlier were that two things can happen, right? And the first one is that the banks have, the mandate to be able to use their discretion. That's the two organizations, right? And the second one is the court order. So given the activities surrounding erroneous transfer, right, the banks are also able to use their discretion to be able to decide appropriately in that regard.
Okay, fantastic. I I just want to go through, we don't have much time, but very quickly, some final remarks from our panelists, just regarding this discussion and then general their insight into fintech fraud. I'll start with Anthony. Anthony, some final remarks from you.
Thanks, Adrian. My final remarks, I think, are pegged on the few insights I've given. Use of technology is inevitable, and one of the advices that I can give my colleagues, I've been in the industry for the last like 15 years. Of course, it's normally a hard thing to embrace change, but then the change is inevitable, and the change is here to help us. So rather than fight the process, I think you can use the process to ensure that top of the game. And if you look at what technology is actually coming on board to help us, it's enabling us to work faster, to work better, and to work more efficient. So what I'll encourage everything, this is an interesting space that we're in, and the faster we embrace it, the faster we can get to the next level.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And some final thoughts from you, Superintendent Mensah. I think you're on mute if you're trying to speak. There you go.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. My final remarks is that, first of all, I would like to thank my colleague panelists for their in-depth knowledge in shedding light on the topic, and also for the organizers. I think the relevance of fintech in the global arena cannot be overemphasized. What I would say is that the role of the law enforcement is also very crucial in helping to solve some of the fraud activities that take place over time. While we focus on the investigative, operational, and analytical support for the various organizations and individuals, I would urge all stakeholders within the fintech industry to also focus on capacity building for the industry players, and also focus on regulatory measures as well as information sharing and alerts, because they say prevention is always better being reactive. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Mensah. Prevention is key, as you say. Thank you for that. Daniel, some final thoughts from you, sir.
Oh, yes, thank you very much, Adrian, for hosting this so far, and it's been very interactive. Then I feel like this is a very good program, and lots of insights, and I just hope we it continues to drive there's a lot of push as to what this is trying to achieve. So I think everyone on this call can always just spread this across, right? 8.0, I know TechCabal QoreID has more to come. So it's a very good platform and a very good session. Thank you very much. But my final thought would just be that it's essentially to just re-echo what KYC is, right? And so in the industry today, KYC, is usually categorized as a compliance function, right? And as much as possible, I'd like to say that there is more to KYC. There is more to how you can utilize KYC to secure your system, right? Look at it from this aspect. The first stage to mitigating a business risk or a financial risk or a fraud risk is by KYC, right? At the point of onboarding, if you have the right KYC system, digital identity system, you are able to profile your customers appropriately, right? And through the right profiling, you are able to put them under the appropriate risk bucket, right? And the kind of financial service that you provide to them, the kind of limits threshold that they are allowed to pursue, right? So it is beyond just using or operating to the level of compliance, right? There is more to what KYC can do for you, right? So I think it's very important that you utilize the expertise of digital identity solutions, and it's very interesting to see that VerifyMe QoreID has been able to inculcate a lot of these things. They've been in the system and have the right system management. So it's very important that to understand that KYC does more than just meeting certain requirements. It's also a fraud management tool and should be incorporated in your fraud management system.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your insights, Daniel. It's been really appreciated. And finally, and certainly not least, Esigie, some final words from you.
Well, so thank you. And I want to take the opportunity to thank all the panelists as well for all their insights and participation. And thank you to you, Adrian. Daniel really also, took the words out of my mouth. Is, one of the things we really need to get across is that KYC is, a lot of our customers can't afford for KYC to be just a chore, right? Where they just overcome their compliance hurdles so that they can move to the rest of the business. KYC should be an integral part of every customer interaction and should be seen as more than identity. The only people that can provide a certain level of layered fraud on identity fraud, on phishing fraud, are really operators in the KYC space. And just to announce, by the way, that the Nigerian operators are sharing data, KYC operators are sharing data and are agreeing to share data and are coming together. So there's collaboration on that end as well. Really begin to look at us as a partner. And also begin to look internally and at expense of building KYC products while trying to build your own fintech product as well. And I think when people start to analyze that, they would see that it's in their best benefit to really have a partner like QoreID, so that we can grow together and help power their financial inclusion products. So, to close it, we're here to help solve the onboarding problem and here to help solve the fraud problem across Africa and across with our customers across Africa. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Esigie. And I'd like to thank you at home, the attendees and the speakers for joining us today. It's been a fascinating discussion. Like I said, we could have gone on for another hour. I just want to mention this event is only made possible by QoreID, VerifyMe company. Thank you guys for your support as part of this Inside Identity series. You can look forward to more series coming up soon. This event was also produced by TechCabal Insights. I would really encourage you as editor-in-chief of TechCabal to subscribe to our daily newsletter. It's one of the best around. TC Insights is our TechCabal's data research and intelligence unit. Really proud of the work that they're doing. It's been a fantastic morning, Friday morning, discussing this really important topic. More conversations to be had around it, and you can find it all here with TechCabal. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful and blessed weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Officer Henry Mensah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.